The program has been designed taking into account the immediate concern of the financial sector. It is said that more frauds happen during the downturn prompted by pressure to perform, and we are seeing it. It is indeed a situation in the banking sector that many frauds are being committed by the constituent borrowers through borrower accounts, either by fudging balance sheets or fudging diverting the funds to purposes which are not authorized. We are also seeing a huge frauds happening in the city of Mumbai itself in the name of loan against FDRs. The liability frauds, we call it, and it is not new. It is happening, and it is still happening. I think in terms of methodology and modus operandi, everyone knows what are the frauds happening, but still the same things get repeated. Even as we like things to remain simple, the truth is that today is an age of complexity where new technology developments have spurred developments in many ways of life and subject areas. As George Orwell once said, men are only as good as technical development allows them to be. Concentrating on the financial system infrastructure today in India and elsewhere is mainly dependent on the technology backbone. New types of products, including derivatives and various delivery channels, are simply impossible to design, build, implement without availability of electronic computing technologies. Product innovation and their complexities in this globalized and competitive world have created a plethora of accounting rules and other regulations impacting the way transactions are stored, recorded, and valued. The milieu has also led to increased susceptibility of mask or hide fraudulent maze of transactions, constituting a complex financial transaction. Further, the penetration of technology into banking process has led to a situation that clear trail of financial transaction can be unraveled only after drilling through several layers of technology in addition to human component. We are seeing this in today's context. Today, the accepted truth is that conventional audit methodology may not suffice to arrive at the truth about complex financial transactions. Rather, a milling of processes and techniques termed as forensic audit or forensic accounting methodologies is imperative to fully decrypt and decipher the mechanics of complex financial transactions in question and conclude about the presence of fraud and whether a fraud is present or not, and the case is a manner amenable and acceptable in the court of law. This is another difficulty with all of us. Even if you detect fraud and prove it, unless you are able to satisfy the legal angle, many of the time the case is thrown out. And this is one of the reasons why many of the cases, financial frauds, are not able to be successful, because we are not able to get evidence in the process. As a supervisor with an inquisitive mind, what is fascinating to me is the sheer number of disciplines involved in forensic examination. A forensic specialist is supposed to know or train in one or more of the relevant disciplines like auditing, fraud examination, accounting, law, computer technologies, apart from the investigation skills to collect, analyze, and evaluate evidential matter and to interpret the observations and findings. I think a forensic specialist is both a detective and an adventure. It is always exciting and fruitful when one employs forensic techniques to solve seemingly intractable and complex issues. As Mark Alden had said in the context of forensic accounting, there is nothing better than that thrill of getting the final bit of evidence, that pieces of jigsaw together, quote. Leaving aside the individualistic perspective, we need to get importance of the criticality of forensic auditing in today's environment, and why Reserve Bank of India, as in recent times, focuses on the importance of forensic audit skill. As seasoned banker, you would appreciate that banking is all about trust and confidence, and fraud is one way of eating away these vital pillars on which the banking leans upon. It is not only a question of loss suffered by the bank, but also about the issue of culture and system in the bank, which needs to have a zero tolerance towards fraudsters and fraudulent activities, and a strong preventive, detective, and corrective capabilities. Reserve Bank of India has issued numerous circulars, guidelines, and reports on frauds and related aspects. One of the circular issued in September 16, 2009 on the subject fraud or risk management system in banks, a role of chief executive officers has required banks to contain measures to ensure effective, quick investigation, monitoring, and follow-up of frauds. The need for forensic skill was stressed as part of this circular. The banks were required to set up dedicated and well-organized special surveillance investigation function, which would on a continuous basis exercise surveillance over potentially fraud-prone areas and investigate into large value frauds with the help of skilled manpower for internal punitive action against the staff and external legal prosecution of the fraudster and their abettors. I would also like to highlight the Basel II related regulatory dispensation, which requires allocation of capital for operational risk under Pillar 1, and all risks not covered or adequately considered under Pillar 1 to be covered under Pillar 2. Losses due to fraud would impact operational risk under Pillar 1 and also residual operational risk concerns under Pillar 2. Hence, better internal control process leading to lesser evidence incidents of fraud could enable on economizing the capital resources. Many of you may be from the auditing field. It is important that the essential difference between the normal audit and forensic accounting or fraud audit techniques are clearly understood and appreciated. The question fraud auditor has uppermost in his mind is not how an accounting system and internal control stack up against applicable standard, but rather, one, what are the weakest links in this system chain of control? Two, what deviation from conventional good accounting practices and or rules or guidelines in this system? The third factor, how are offline transactions handled and who can authorize such transactions? What would be the simplest way to compromise this system? This is the fourth aspect. And fifthly, what control measure in this system can be bypassed by higher authorities? What is the nature of work environment? Auditing for fraud proactively involves being aware of various fraud schemes in the area being looked at and looking for similar pattern that may constitute a fraud. In fact, Reserve Bank of India has been always circulating the modus operandi of of the major frauds that is happening. The incidents which has happened in Mumbai, very few months back, the same fraud, same modus operandi frauds had taken place in Mumbai and in Kolkata, but still when we spoke to banks, they said, yes, we have received the caution-wise modus operandi, but when we checked up with some of the compliance officers, they say that there is a delay or gap in sending the circulars from central office to the head offices to the branches. So the branches have no access, or otherwise knowingly they would have compromised on these transactions. If they had read the caution letter and modus operandi, some of these frauds which has happened in Mumbai could have been prevented. It is stated that the timeliness of fraud detection lies in detecting the symptom or indicator of fraud, what are known as red flags in the audit terminology, in a timely manner, To proactively facilitate fraud risk management, it is important that banks identify the red flags in respect of major banking function or processes. I also understand comparison between normal audit evidence and forensic evidence includes many aspects like documentation versus public document searches, inquiry versus interviewing, confirmation versus varied alternate source, physical examination versus electronic laboratory analysis of evidence, re-performance versus detailed analysis of electronic data, and observation versus surveillance. Interviewing technique itself is now a specialized topic in fraud management. In fact, we had conducted a program recently for the compliance officers, chief compliance of a bank. We had brought in a speaker from one of the big international firm. The lady shared with us how and what is important of interviewing persons involved in the audit or persons who are committed fraud, either internal or external. So interviewing itself is a new, it's a new technology, and particularly in the electronic frauds, this is very important that the person who is going to interview or investigate knows interview techniques. Otherwise, it's difficult to get information or elicit information. Specialized training and expertise is required for personal handling fraud risk management. It is also acknowledged that forensic audit or accounting skill can also reduce audit risk. Professional auditing standard in recent years have enjoined upon auditors to consider the risk of material misstatements due to fraud. During the course of an audit, evidence or information may come to the auditor's attention that fraud may have occurred. In these circumstances, the auditors maintains an obligation to perform sufficient audit work to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are not materially misstated. This is applicable in the case of DNBs, particularly NBFCs, where Reserve Bank doesn't inspect all, whereas auditors who are statutory auditors who inspect or audit, they find a lot of information, but they are supposed to now, as per their own institute or as well as per the requirement of Reserve Bank, the auditors are supposed to report such frauds coming to the light. It may become necessary to involve forensic specialist or perform forensic procedure in order to obtain the appropriate level of assurance with respect to financial statement or the audited aspects. Thus, forensic audit can also be proactively used as opposed to the widely acknowledged reactive usage by management or by auditors to carry out general reviews of activities to highlight risk arising either out of fraud or in a potential fraud-prone area for the purpose of initiating focused review of particular areas and targeting specific threats to a banking organization. It is quite interesting to know some of the basic theories involving fraud detection, of which I can recall some like the Occam's razor, the theory of inverse logic, and doctrine of triage. While their explanation may be apparently simple in contrast to the apparently esoteric sounding names, the trick lies in comprehending and applying them suitably. In particular situation, I think you will get an overview of these aspects during the program, as many of the speakers are going to discuss with you. I'm also fascinated by some of the techniques involved in forensic accounting or auditing, about which I have some broad idea. One of the technique I have often read about is Benford analysis, which is mathematical tool to determine whether variable under study is a case of unintentional error or a mistake or a fraud. The Benford's law states that fabricating figures as indicators of fraud processes a different pattern from random or valid figures. On detecting any such phenomenon, the variable under study is subjected to a detailed scrutiny. Relative size factor detects outliers or unusual data, which may be due to either simple error or frauds based on the basic concept that each field in the transaction has a normal range, and any data falling outside the range is unusual or an outlier and need to be further investigated. Of course, an important caveat in these measures are not foolproof, and hence one needs to be beware of its limitations so that they are only applied to contain set of applicable sets. I also understand that data mining technique can also be used as a forensic accounting technique, which involves use of computer-assisted technique of large, particularly in the area of large volume data, hidden or unexpected information or patterns. Data mining techniques are categorized into discovery, predictive, modeling, and deviation and link analysis. I would also like to stress upon the importance of use of computer-assisted auditing tools known as CAATs to deal with auditing in a computerized environment for applying large data sets and to process complex transactions, thereby saving time and improving effectiveness. The tools helps an auditor in implementing audit procedures such as testing details of transactions and balances, identifying inconsistencies or significant fluctuation in data sets being tested, testing general as well as applicable control of computer systems, reperformance of calculations performed by application or accounting system, among the other areas. In many areas of investigation, computer forensics is part of the forensic audit and involving using various tools to gather or collect data, examine data, and followed by reporting and findings. I understand there are various toolkits to conduct forensic analysis of any operating system, database, mail software, cell phones, PDAs, network devices, so on and so forth. To support forensic investigation, it is important that banks incorporate the needs of forensic as part of their information system life cycle. As many of you know, I had headed a working group on information security, electronic banking technology, risk management, and tackling cyber frauds to enhance guidelines in relative areas on par with international standards. We had advised need for improvement in forensic audit capability in commercial banks as part of the report. Guidelines based on the working group report was issued by the Reserve Bank of India in April 2011, where the guidelines stated that continuous audit in respect of transaction prone to frauds, particularly the liability frauds, there is need to be a 24/7 monitoring, particularly phishing attacks. Unless you do this, it is not going to be in the manual system. When you pass a bill or a check or a voucher, you used to physically see, but now all those things have gone, so everything has been centralized. So unless you use continuous audit tools, what used to be done in the manual system, you will not be able to implement in the computerized environment. That is the reason why we need a continuous audit in fraud-prone areas, particularly the liabilities and the huge advances portfolio. There are various functional areas for which audit tools can be leveraged. In KYC AML, the various aspects that can be examined include transfer of funds from one account to many and vice versa, funds transfers above certain thresholds, gaps between alert generation and action on alert, multiple transactions below certain threshold to avoid reported as alerts, any type of transaction not getting captured in the AML system, washing of funds through inoperative accounts, high-value transactions unconnected with risk profile. I am referring to all these things to the Cobra Post expose, where Reserve Bank used these tools. In just 3-4 days, the Reserve Bank inspectors could detect so many things which bank themselves should have done it using these techniques. These are all simple tools available as part of the audit, internal audit. Unique customer ID, frequent opening and closing of accounts in the same name, etc. In regard to credit area, Various areas include pattern of transactions in the borrower account, transfer between accounts of same borrower, transfer among groups accounts, gaps in system-based identification of special mentioned accounts and non-performing accounts, frequency of overdrafts, appropriateness of rating of borrower facility, adherence to rating pricing correlation, red flags in operations of accounts, rolling over short-term loans, etc. These were some of the issues in the loan portfolio. In treasury area, areas of focus include correct calculation of P&L, evaluation of internal accounts, verifying user access, logs to access, compliance to internal control guidelines, with focus on segregation of duties between the front office and the back office of our transaction. These are common in most of the banks. Transactions are now done not during the office hours, also it is done after the office hours. So how to capture these? Flow of account entries from treasury into accounting system, exceeding of transaction, dealer, counterparty limits, investigation of missing or deal number and cancellation of deals, etc., and so on and so forth. It is critical that audit tools are used by banks internally to improve the outcomes of internal audit and forensic examination process. I believe that auditing for fraud is a much of an intuitive process as it is a formal analytical methodology. It is as much an art as it is a science. Skill depends on the right mindset, like thinking like a fraudster, like we have in the computerized environment, ethical hackers. So similar thing has to be deployed even in frauds. So the investigative person should have that mentality, or you should have that capabilities. Keen eye on to look at weaknesses in the controls and practices. The requirement is not just master the technique of forensic audit, but also to have the required mental disposition of doggedness and persistence. In the backdrop of increase in frauds and the need for developing forensic audit skill, I believe that personnel having such skills would be in a great demand and would be valuable asset to the bank for their fraud risk management activities. I hope some of you who are attending this program start applying the techniques taught during the day, and also go in for more advanced training as required, at least for the team in the forensic audit teams. Others who are in middle and senior decision-making authorities can at least know the process involved, which may enable them to support putting in place suitable forensic capabilities in your organization.